when there's a better option available, which is invest in the infrastructure, invest in energy, invest in nuclear, invest in this stuff to support, to bring prices down. The markets are giving you a signal. The answer is not, shrink the economy, raise unemployment, kill 40,000 people for every 1% unemployment goes up. The answer is invest in energy, invest in infrastructure. I find myself getting frustrated as a father because you just go, what are they doing? Like, they're making the future worse to try to make the optics of today better for a brief period of time.
Yeah. And I know we got to wrap up here soon, but another thing with the labor market, I mean, obviously the big discussion in the last couple of months is, are we in a recession? And all the analysts I've seen are pointing to, CNBC and your typical analyst points to unemployment, like, oh no, unemployment's relatively low, labor market's still strong, but nobody brings in the participation rate, which was completely obliterated in the aftermath of the lockdowns in 2020. Like, yes, the unemployment rate is relatively low, but millions of people have dropped out of the labor force aren't even calculated in that denominator anymore. I don't know if I'm just reading too much into it, but that's something that seems like an important variable that should be brought up in this analysis.
Well, it is, and I would even take it a step, simpler than that, which is, in May of last year, Raphael Bostic at the Atlanta Fed was saying, well, we can't tighten yet because unemployment is still too high, right? And so, yeah, inflation has picked up a little bit, but it's transitory, and unemployment is still too high. Unemployment is a lagging indicator. Unemployment, if you are managing an economy, managing monetary policy by looking at employment, it's like driving your car looking in the rearview mirror. It is. I've sworn I'm going to stop being so. It's a bad idea. I'm going to be gentle. It's a bad idea. And so here we have the same Raphael Bostic a year later saying we're not in a recession because unemployment is low. My head wanted to explode. So you were wrong on inflation on the way up because you were looking at unemployment. Wham, you run into the inflation wall because you're driving looking at the rearview mirror. And now you're saying there's not a recession because unemployment is still good. Now, even if you look at a good leading indicator of where unemployment is going to go is part-time for economic reasons, right? So basically it's a measure of people that are saying they're working part-time for economic reasons. In other words, business is not good enough for them to be working full-time, so they're working part-time. And that number bottomed like 2-3 months ago. So unemployment's about to go up, and these guys will react to it late once again. In the meantime, they're debating 75 or 100 basis points. Okay, I mean, it's the same thing as debating how transitory inflation was a year ago. So it's frustrating to me because they could be doing a much better job than they are. But at the end of the day, I think you just have to realize they're politicians.
Yeah, and that's something I've been writing in my newsletter a lot is at the end of the day, what we have to realize as individuals, as local communities, as people who are citizens of states and not a federal government, that it is going to come down to individual action to fix this problem. We cannot depend on politicians to get us out of the problem that they created. We cannot depend on Jerome Powell and others to get us out of the monetary problem they created. We've got to really get our hands dirty, and as citizens we have to take responsibility as well, where it's like, all right, we've been sitting here waiting for these people to fix these problems that they've created for quite a while now. Like, when are we gonna pull up our bootstraps, tighten the belt, and say, all right, we're going to begin building nukes here, ignoring federal policy. We're going to begin adopting currencies that compete with the dollar, whether it be gold or Bitcoin, and using them and messaging to them like, hey, we're not going to wait for you anymore. I think that's another thing I would like to see as things progress throughout the rest of this year. And if energy and food inflation continues to increase, as people taking things into their own hand, going and shaking the rancher's hand and saying, hey, how can I help you out? Really pushing for state level energy policy that separates itself from the federal government. I mean, as much as we're complaining about the actions of these policymakers, there is a bit of responsibility that we as individual citizens can begin to take up as well and start a movement there.
Yeah, you vote with your wallet ultimately, and that will start to move policy. And I think that there is an awakening that I think has happened in Washington to a certain degree post-COVID with supply chains. Now you're starting to see a bit of a debate around industrial policy, which is very encouraging to me. Industrial policy should have been started in this country 15 years ago. certainly post Great Financial Crisis. You had a number of business luminaries calling for it, but lots in Washington were against it. A lot of the sort of usual suspect neoliberal economists against it. But now that we have gotten to the point of widespread concern about infrastructure, domestic production, reshoring, national security issues have all become tied together very closely, so closely that even willfully blind policymakers in Washington have refused to see it. They have to be part of that discussion. And so ultimately, to me, one of the great things about this country is what Winston Churchill said, which is the Americans always do the right thing after they've exhausted all the alternatives. And we've pretty much exhausted all the alternatives. So I think we're starting to see early signs of us doing the right things. I'm just hopeful that we do them a little faster.
Time is of the essence here, freaks. There's a lot falling apart. If you haven't noticed, I agree and co-sign that we need a bit more urgency here. And like you said in that tweet, it's just like, hey, it's a decision. You just change the rules and allow people to go about and do things. That's the crazy thing. It's to an extent, it's just simply mental. It's just a decision, a will to actually do things.
I watched this great. Yeah, I said so. My family has me and my wife and three boys. We have a group text, right? And I sent a video of the coach of Ole Miss's baseball team telling his guys this great 2-minute speech where he said, "Look, in I think it was 59, right, when Roger Bannister ran a sub 4-minute mile. At any rate, that's not important.